As a new challenge, I decided to entrust the company's future to a female employee. I introduced her to a senior executive at a major bank I have a good relationship with. And the initial discussions about financing seemed promising. However, when she visited the bank alone, she was turned away in just 5 minutes with the comment, "Your company doesn't belong here." She returned to the office, visibly shaken. It turned out that the new manager, the son of the vice president who had just been assigned, had treated her poorly. Despite my prior arrangement with the loan department chief. Furious, I called the bank president. "If that's how you're going to treat us, I'll close all 51 group company accounts worth $3.65 billion, I declared, sending the bank staff into a frenzy. The next day, as the female employee and I arrived, we were met with, "My name is David Collins. Recently, I've been dealing with a stiff shoulder and a growing belly, but fortunately, my physical checkup results showed no abnormalities." With a sigh of relief, I celebrated my 55th birthday. I married my wife when I was 35, but our inability to have children caused tension in our relationship. Arguments became frequent. And we divorced 10 years ago. As many divorced people say, divorce is far more challenging than marriage. Without children, there was no custody battle to contend with. My ex-wife, not being materialistic, didn't demand excessive asset division, so our divorce negotiations were resolved smoothly. We parted amicably, and despite our divorce, we didn't sever ties. In fact, our relationship transformed into one more akin to old friends, and we've had better conversations since. 2 years after our divorce, my ex-wife remarried and had a child. She's now deeply immersed in parenting. And I occasionally lend an ear to her concerns or offer support, cheering her on in her new life. Looking back, I'm grateful that our divorce allowed her, 8 years younger than me, to remarry while she was still at an age to have children, leading to her current happiness. As for me, I've remained single since the divorce. I feel like I've long passed the midpoint of my life, and looking back, it seems both lengthy and fleeting. After my mother, my only family, passed away, I was left with no one to protect, and my work became my sole purpose in life. Living a life where I neither walk alongside someone nor nurture and witness the growth of another. I sometimes feel a sense of loneliness and emptiness. Perhaps that's why I find myself starting new ventures or encouraging others to launch internal startups, seeking a sense of fulfillment akin to parenting by supporting and helping them succeed. Based on my own experiences, I've dedicated significant effort to supporting single mothers and assisting single-parent families. When I was in the 3rd grade, my father passed away, and my mother raised me on her own. Back then, divorce rates were much lower than they are today, and single-mother households were rare. Schools were not equipped to support such families, and I recall there was little accommodation for us in classes and school events. It was a time when fathers were rarely involved in child-rearing, so during school open house events, rows of mothers would be present, with the occasional father standing out alone. Children from single-father households often felt out of place and very self-conscious in such situations. My mother, being a schoolteacher, often couldn't attend school functions, which left me feeling uneasy. One memory that stands out was creating gifts for Father's Day. I always drew an image of my father from memory, and in my drawings, he never aged. Today, I hear from my subordinates with children that preschools and kindergartens no longer focus on specific days like Father's Day or Mother's Day. Instead, teachers encourage kids to draw pictures of someone they love, using neutral terms like your family member rather than mom or dad. This approach takes into consideration not just single-parent families but also children who may not live with their parents, instead being raised by grandparents, relatives, or foster parents. Ensuring the classroom environment is inclusive and considerate of all family situations. When I was a child, my mother would leave me in the care of unrelated neighbors while she worked. This wasn't unusual, it was simply part of everyday life where people supported and relied on each other. There was a sense that children were raised by the entire community. People were generally tolerant and laid back about kids playing in parks or vacant lots. However, this came with a rougher side. A well-known strict neighbor might scold you, or a teacher might suddenly deliver a knuckle rap without warning. Among the children, there were no filters either. I recall being teased as the kid without a dad and encountering various unconscious forms of labeling that were casually accepted at the time. It was an era of both the good old days and the bad old ways, a time with its share of charm but also its share of outdated and hurtful practices. I think I was subtly hurt by being categorized as a child from a single-mother household. Saying that everyone is equal is far easier than achieving it. But I believe we must continue to promote inclusivity and break down emotional barriers. That said, I was raised in an environment far less sensitive than today's world. And I carried many ingrained stereotypes and was shaped by outdated practices from that era. Adapting my values to align with the modern age of diversity hasn't been easy, but by carefully listening to the perspectives of younger employees, I've gradually been able to accept and embrace new ideas. This led me to make a pivotal decision, to shift from a management style where I led from the top, to one that empowers others to take the lead. I decided to appoint someone who could truly understand and represent the needs of single-parent families. A female employee named Taylor. Taylor, 47, is an excellent employee who, like my mother, lost her husband and raised her two sons alone. Now that her youngest is in high school, she has more time and energy to dedicate to her career. At this perfect timing, I decided to entrust her with a key role. Rather than simply expanding this initiative as part of our existing company operations, I proposed a new approach, having Taylor launch an internal startup. If this model succeeds, it could serve as an inspiration for many single mothers and be a significant benefit to our company as well. Since Taylor remains employed by the company, her risks are minimized. After careful consideration, I've decided to take on the challenge of launching an internal startup. I've brought a business plan with me. I'm deeply honored by this opportunity and will do my utmost to succeed. Thank you for believing in me, Taylor said. I asked Taylor to give me her answer within 3 weeks. And she came back with her decision in just 1 week. Quick decisions are the mark of an excellent business person. And the fact that you also prepared a business plan? That's promising for the future, I said, impressed. Although I had only given her a rough outline of the vision for a business to support single-parent families, Taylor had transformed the idea into a fully viable business plan. Her proposal was to launch a service that dispatches certified professionals such as childcare workers, nurses, and caregivers to families in need, particularly addressing the shortage of support for children with illnesses. The plan was thorough, addressing potential challenges and offering exciting possibilities. It was clear to me that my judgment of Taylor's potential was spot on. To get started, we needed financing, so we visited the bank. Our company's main bank is one of the large mega banks. And as the CEO, I've built relationships with their headquarters and various branches. For this project, I decided to work with a branch where a banker I knew served as the loan department manager. I had met Brian at a lecture on supporting single-mother households, and we hit it off immediately. To start things off, I arranged for Taylor to meet Brian for an introduction. Brian, who actively attends various lectures and workshops to enhance his work, was deeply interested in the socially impactful nature of the project. He listened intently as Taylor explained her plans, fully engaged with every detail. We'll need to submit the required documents and get approval from the higher-ups, but with Mr. Collins backing this, I believe the loan will be approved, Brian said confidently. With his assurance, I felt relieved and left the rest to Taylor. 2 weeks later, Taylor went to the bank to follow up on the loan. But she returned to the office shortly afterward, looking dejected. Judging by the time she was gone, she had only been at the bank for about 5 minutes. What happened, Taylor? Weren't we supposed to hear the results of the loan today? I asked, puzzled. Typically, after a loan is approved, there are numerous procedures to finalize the agreement. Even with today's paperless systems, large loans like this require signing several documents, which takes time. But Taylor had returned almost immediately, her expression dark. Surely, you got a positive response from the bank, right? Noticing Taylor's unusual demeanor, I asked her the question. I fully expected an affirmative answer, but Taylor silently shook her head. What? How is that possible? Brian assured us the loan would be approved with almost 100% certainty. I said, stunned by the unexpected outcome. I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Collins, Taylor said, bowing deeply. There was a sudden personnel change, and the loan manager was replaced. All the documents we submitted were rejected. Wait, what? Taylor bowed deeply, almost abruptly, and I asked her to raise her head. Can you explain what happened in detail? I requested. Yes. She replied, looking uncomfortable as she began to explain the situation. Today was supposed to be the day Brian, the former loan department manager, would deliver the loan results as promised. However, when Taylor didn't hear from him, she decided to visit the bank in person. However, the person who greeted her was a banker she didn't recognize. He introduced himself as the newly assigned loan department manager and handed her a business card that read Jason. Taylor showed me the card, and it did indeed display the familiar branch name and the title of loan department manager. Jason said, when I looked at the handover documents, I assumed the name was male, but I see now you're a woman, visibly disappointed. Taylor explained. It seemed Jason had misunderstood from the loan documents that Taylor was male. Given that the name Taylor can be used for both men and women, it wasn't an unreasonable mistake. But then he said, oh, so that's why this proposal is so overly optimistic, it makes sense now. We'll be canceling the loan discussions, and immediately sent me away, she added. What? As Taylor's shoulders drooped, my anger rose, and I could feel myself mentally readying for a fight. Even after carefully reviewing Taylor's business plan, I couldn't find any significant flaws. They told me that a bottom-tier company has no place here, Taylor said, her voice heavy with frustration. Hearing those words, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. It was clear that Jason, mistaking Taylor for an unknown female entrepreneur starting from scratch, had dismissed her as unworthy of consideration. He likely assumed the business proposal was amateurish, and didn't bother to properly review the plan, or recognize that Taylor had the backing of a profitable and well-capitalized company. That Jason clearly isn't competent at his job. But a personnel change at this time of year? Did the previous manager, Brian, cause some kind of trouble? Taylor shook her head emphatically. I was told that he was transferred to another branch, but knowing Brian's professionalism, I found it strange that he would leave without notifying his major clients. I can't imagine Brian being transferred without at least saying goodbye to his key customers, I said. Taylor nodded deeply before continuing. As I was leaving the small meeting room next to the service counter, I overheard Jason speaking proudly to the branch manager, Logan. He said, my rival in the promotion race was in the way, so I asked my father to have him demoted. It seemed Jason, the newly appointed loan manager, was the son of a senior executive at the bank's headquarters. To maintain appearances, Taylor was told that Brian had been transferred to another branch, but in reality, it might have been a demotion disguised as a reassignment. I also overheard Jason saying, as long as you do what I say, I'll make sure you're not treated poorly. Logan, implying that he'd report any disobedience to his father. I couldn't hear much more because the female teller near me seemed suspicious of my eavesdropping, so I left the bank, Taylor explained. And so, within just 5 minutes, Taylor had returned to the office, disheartened. It was evident that Jason was taking a high-handed attitude not only with Taylor but also with Logan. I began to worry about Brian's current situation. With that, I decided to make a call. Hello, it's been a while. I'd like to discuss something with you. That one phone call would mark the start of my counterattack. The next day, Taylor returned to the bank, only to be greeted by Jason, who was smirking smugly. I stood at a distance, observing the situation unfold while keeping myself inconspicuous. "Oh, Taylor, isn't it? I thought I made it clear yesterday that we won't be proceeding with the loan. What brings you here now?" He taunted, his tone dripping with mockery. "You remembered my name? Well, given it was just yesterday, I suppose it's not too surprising. Though I wouldn't have expected someone who can't even interpret a business plan to have a good memory." Taylor shot back, lacing her words with biting sarcasm. Taylor wasn't about to back down, responding to Jason with a sharp wit. Just then, an authoritative voice interrupted. "Jason, that's enough." The bank grew abuzz as a man in his late 50s appeared. "What? Mr. Anderson? Why are you here?" Jason stammered, panic evident on his face. And who could blame him? The president of this megabank, Mr. Anderson, had just walked into the modest branch, flanked by two sharply dressed subordinates. The female teller at the counter rushed to fetch Logan, the branch manager, who quickly emerged from the side door, visibly nervous. "Please, this way," Logan stammered, leading Mr. Anderson and his team to the meeting room. "Mr. Collins, I'm here in response to your call yesterday. May I have a moment of your time?" Mr. Anderson said this as he bowed slightly toward me, standing directly across from Logan. At that moment, everyone in the bank turned their attention to me. Jason, who had never met me before, looked visibly startled. Seeing the president of the bank, a man of such high rank, treating an older man like me with such respect clearly caught him off guard. I could almost see the thoughts running through Jason's mind. Who is this guy? As soon as I became the center of attention, Logan seemed to notice me for the first time. His eyes widened in surprise, and he gave a small, hurried bow. Of course, Logan and I had met several times before, but it was clear he had no idea I had a direct connection to Mr. Anderson. Our relationship had always been minimal. My dealings with this branch started because of Brian, whose character I admired after meeting him at a lecture. My interactions with Logan had always been indirect, mediated by Brian. It wasn't entirely Logan's fault for not knowing about my connection to Mr. Anderson. I had never flaunted it. And perhaps the bank's headquarters hadn't deemed this branch important enough to keep Logan in the loop on sensitive matters. "I never imagined Mr. Anderson himself would come to discuss this matter," Logan said, still visibly shaken. As the president of a megabank, Mr. Anderson's schedule was undoubtedly packed. I could only imagine how many appointments he had to cancel to make this visit happen. Acknowledging his sincerity, I had already decided to withdraw my harsh declaration from the day before. However, for the sake of teaching Jason a lesson, I made sure to keep my expression stern. The scene had drawn attention from the bank's other customers, so we moved to a private meeting room. "Taylor, you don't need to worry about a thing. Just hold your head high," I whispered to her as we entered the room. Once everyone was inside, Mr. Anderson gestured for Taylor and me to take seats on the leather sofa, while he sat across from us. Logan, standing awkwardly nearby, seemed unsure of what to do until Mr. Anderson addressed him. "Logan, sit next to me," the president instructed. Obediently, Logan took his seat. Jason, however, seemed to assume he should also sit next to Logan. But as he tried to settle in, Mr. Anderson shot him a sharp glare. "Jason, you stand," Mr. Anderson commanded firmly. "Yes, sir," Jason stammered, startled. He moved to stand by the wall near Mr. Anderson's subordinates, looking small and out of place. "I must apologize sincerely. One of our employees has acted inappropriately," Mr. Anderson said, standing and bowing deeply. "Please, raise your head." "It pains me to see you bowing like this," I said sincerely. Watching Mr. Anderson, someone older than me and a person I've long respected, bowing so deeply in apology was an uncomfortable sight. I must admit, in my anger yesterday, I rashly declared, close all 51 group company accounts worth $3.65 billion. Over the phone, I confessed, feeling a twinge of regret. $3.65 billion. Jason blurted, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. Jason, be quiet, Mr. Anderson said, his tone stern. Mr. Collins does not only hold accounts at this branch. His group of companies treats our bank as their main financial institution. Jason's mouth remained agape, unable to process the information. I always make it a point to introduce myself and exchange business cards when meeting someone for the first time. However, with Jason, whom I met today for the first time, I couldn't bring myself to offer a proper greeting. As a result, Jason was understandably bewildered by the situation, unable to figure out who I was. While the conversation between Mr. Anderson and me continued seamlessly. When you went out of your way to offer a sincere apology and arrange this meeting to discuss things directly, I realized I had acted immaturely yesterday. I said, feeling a twinge of guilt as I scratched my head awkwardly. After hearing about the situation, I felt it was imperative to meet with you directly to apologize. I'm sorry for the short notice, but I greatly appreciate you making time for this meeting. The sincerity of Mr. Anderson's apology was evident, and I began to feel a pang of guilt for my outburst the day before. Jason, apologize to Mr. Collins and Taylor, Mr. Anderson said firmly, turning to address him directly. With all due respect, sir. I understand that Mr. Collins is an important client for our bank. However, I still believe my decision not to approve the loan for Taylor was the correct one. Even in this situation, Jason refused to admit his faults. Jason, you did review the business plan I submitted before making your decision, didn't you? Taylor asked directly. Jason, unable to offer a rebuttal, hung his head. From my perspective, it was clear he hadn't properly evaluated the business plan either. Surely, didn't you dismiss the plan just because Taylor is a woman, without thoroughly examining its content or the business's potential? I pressed further, cornering him. Well, Jason stammered, clearly at a loss for words. Yesterday, Jason blatantly said, your outlook is overly optimistic because you're a woman. But I strongly disagree. I'm confident that the business model is viable and will turn a profit once it's on track. Her decisive statement was inspiring. It's an undeniable fact that Taylor is new to management. While it's natural for a bank to feel some uncertainty about funding a new entrepreneur, for a major bank with significant revenue and assets, the loan amount in question should not be cause for hesitation. This innovative project leverages the strengths of an internal startup, fostering collaboration with group companies, and the repayment simulation for the loan is both practical and feasible. For example, the service includes dispatching childcare workers for regular or sick childcare, and clients can participate as testers for baby food or baby products handled by our group companies. This feedback loop reduces service fees, benefiting both the clients and the company. This approach reflects Taylor's unique insight into the challenges faced by single mothers, and I found her ideas genuinely impressive. When I reviewed the business plan, I realized that Taylor had the qualities of a capable entrepreneur. The project not only contributes to society but is also designed to be a viable business. And I decided to fully support it and provide ongoing backing as needed. Initially, I planned to fund the startup entirely through my company as a management-led initiative. However, Taylor pointed out that this approach would make the venture no different from establishing a new department within the company. She proposed starting with employee-driven funding, ensuring the new business would truly reflect the principles of an internal startup. That's why we sought a loan from this bank, but with the unexpected arrival of Jason as an adversary, our original goal of minimizing management's involvement crumbled completely. Ideally, I would have preferred not to step in at all. I wanted Taylor to feel the sense of accomplishment that comes with saying, I negotiated this on my own, but it was disappointing that things didn't turn out that way. But honestly, every time I've worked with a woman, it's never gone well," Jason said, making an outrageous remark without a shred of remorse. His deep-seated prejudice was evident. Perhaps he had unresolved grievances from past interactions with women. But personal bias should never influence business decisions. If negotiations fail because of my own shortcomings, I can accept that. But dismissing a proposal outright simply because I'm a woman is unacceptable," Taylor said resolutely. "I feel the same way. The person I respect most in my life is a woman. Of course, I deeply respect my father and many male mentors, but..." Mr. Anderson nodded, meeting my gaze. "That woman is none other than Mr. Cullen's mother. She was my teacher in elementary school, my mentor," Mr. Anderson said, his voice filled with emotion. "What?" Jason exclaimed, his voice loud with shock. "That's an incredible connection," Taylor said, her eyes wide in surprise. "We've known each other for a long time," Mr. Anderson explained. I then began explaining my relationship with Mr. Anderson. "In fact, I've known him long before he became the president of the bank. As Mr. Anderson had mentioned, he was one of my mother's students during her time as an elementary school teacher. He had grown up in a wealthy household, but it was a turbulent one with strained marital relations between his parents. As a result, his childhood was often lonely and emotionally unstable. Mr. Anderson once told me that my mother had been the one to save him during those difficult years. While I don't know the details of what transpired between them, it was clear their bond went far beyond the typical teacher-student relationship. From my perspective, their connection was profound. Mr. Anderson respected my mother as his lifelong mentor and maintained contact with her even after graduation. Although they didn't meet frequently, they exchanged letters and postcards. And he visited her during significant milestones such as his middle school graduation and coming-of-age ceremony. To me, Mr. Anderson was like an older brother figure, someone I admired but wasn't particularly close to. My mother, however, was proud of her former student, who had become a successful banker. When I decided to leave my corporate job and start my own company, Mr. Anderson was the first person who came to mind for advice. My first business venture was blessed with favorable circumstances, including timing, luck, and talented partners, which allowed it to achieve stability faster than I had anticipated. Mr. Anderson's guidance played a significant role in that success. Over time, I came to manage multiple group companies, and Mr. Anderson was always there to lend his support. Our relationship wasn't just built on friendship but also on mutual respect as business professionals. My mother watched over the two of us with a warm smile, as if she were the proud mother of two sons. She passed away shortly after witnessing Mr. Anderson's promotion to bank president. Just as my mother was a lifelong mentor to Mr. Anderson, I'm certain he held a special place in her heart as one of her most cherished students. Regardless of gender or financial status, a remarkable individual will always stand out, just as someone who is unworthy of respect will remain so, no matter their wealth or position," Mr. Anderson said, casting a pointed glance at Jason before turning back to Taylor and me. "The responsibility also lies with me for allowing such behavior from an employee. I will ensure that this arrogant and incompetent loan manager, who relies solely on being the son of an executive, is demoted," Mr. Anderson stated firmly. "Demoted? No way!" Jason shrieked, interrupting Mr. Anderson mid-sentence. It seems that Brian, the previous loan manager, was unfairly demoted at Jason's behest because he was seen as an obstacle. "Please look into this matter as well," I requested firmly. If someone as diligent and sincere as Brian had been treated unjustly, it was something I couldn't tolerate. I asked Mr. Anderson to investigate the situation. "Of course. I will launch an investigation immediately and take appropriate action. It's deeply regrettable that such arrogant behavior was allowed to persist under my watch," Mr. Anderson responded, his tone filled with genuine remorse. Mr. Anderson looked visibly apologetic. As bank president, it's only natural that you focus on the bigger picture, maintaining a broad perspective and foresight. It's understandable that you wouldn't get involved in minor incidents. I should be the one apologizing for making such a fuss yesterday, I said, acknowledging my own misstep. The root cause of this entire situation was my reckless outburst over the phone, which had forced the bank's president to attend this meeting in person. For that, I felt deeply remorseful. Well, it's been a while since I've seen this fiery side of you, David. Honestly, if it weren't for moments like these, I wouldn't have had the chance to cancel unnecessary meetings and pointless gatherings. I'm actually grateful for it. Let's set work aside for today and grab some drinks together. At that moment, he was less the president of a megabank and more the kind-hearted older brother figure I remembered. What a wonderful relationship, Taylor said with a gentle smile, her expression filled with warmth. Her expression carried a warmth that reminded me of my mother, brimming with maternal affection. I wish you all the best in this new adventure, Taylor. And Logan, I'm counting on you, Mr. Anderson said before leaving with his team, flashing a bright smile as he exited the room. Wait. Please, listen to me, Jason cried, wedging himself through the closing door in a desperate attempt to chase after Mr. Anderson. The rest of us silently watched him go, leaving the room in an almost eerie calm, like the stillness after a storm. After a long pause, Logan, who had been quietly observing the situation, stepped forward to take charge of the room once again. I believe the loan manager position will be vacant for a while, so I'll handle this matter myself, Logan said, taking on the responsibility of directly managing Taylor's loan discussions. A few weeks later, Brian, who had been unfairly demoted by Jason, was reinstated at the branch. When Brian expressed his gratitude to me, I told him there was no need to thank me. This was simply the recognition of your capabilities, not something I made happen, I said. I knew Brian would continue to make fair and thoughtful decisions as loan manager, balancing the bank's profitability with a genuine concern for the people seeking loans. 2 months later, Taylor officially launched her company as its CEO, successfully securing the necessary funding. Initially, her work focused on spreading awareness, recruiting users and childcare workers, and conducting applicant screenings. Full-scale services, such as dispatching childcare workers, were still on the horizon. However, the response from single-parent families exceeded expectations, with applications for the service growing faster than anticipated. Even my ex-wife expressed interest in the service, registering for future use. This service aims to support not only single-parent households, dual-income families, and those managing both caregiving and childcare simultaneously, but also to provide a reprieve for solo parents needing a break. Taylor is fully committed to making it a service that brings joy to a broad range of users. As a stay-at-home mom who suddenly became a widow and felt completely lost, you gave me a place to belong, Mr. Collins. And now, you've given me such an incredible opportunity. I'm truly grateful, Taylor said sincerely. One day, Taylor expressed her gratitude to me once again. No, Taylor, you only had to step back because of health issues after giving birth. Before that, you were thriving at a major corporation. Having someone as talented as you join us was a stroke of luck for our company, I replied honestly. I had always wanted to support single-parent families through meaningful initiatives, but seeing it come to fruition in such an outstanding way was largely thanks to Taylor's efforts. I genuinely felt that entrusting Taylor with the first internal startup project had been the right decision. Mr. Collins, your ex-wife also registered as a user, right? You seem to still get along well with her. Don't you feel jealous of her new husband? Taylor asked, catching me completely off guard. No, not at all. I have no lingering feelings, so I don't feel any jealousy toward her husband. On the contrary, I'm glad she became a mother after we parted ways, I replied. To me, my ex-wife's child feels like a relative. While I'm not directly involved in raising them, I see them as someone I want to quietly cheer on and watch grow from afar. "You're so kind," Taylor said softly. Then, after a slight pause, she added with a flushed face, "I find myself feeling jealous of your ex-wife." "What?" I exclaimed, completely stunned. Taylor looked down, her face flushed to her ears. Was this a confession of love? I took a deep breath to calm my racing thoughts. Perhaps there was a future where Taylor and I could walk together as partners, both professionally and personally. For the first time in years, my heart felt light and hopeful. I didn't know where our relationship would go, but for the first time, I was looking forward to a tomorrow that might not revolve solely around work.